Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we are in our 9th lesson now in our series of doctrinal studies. In this lesson, we're going to be starting a two-part series of messages on the virgin birth and the hypostatic union. Now, before we begin our study on this subject, we need to look at the reason why it was necessary for God to be born into this world and to be like us and to have a human body as we have. Why was it important that God come to this world and be born into this world? And the reason was because that he needed to meet the requirements that were laid down by God himself in order to be a kinsman redeemer. Now, there were 4 requirements for the kinsman redeemer. The first requirement was that the kinsman must be related to the one that's being redeemed. You have to be related to them. You can't just be a friend. You have to be related to the one that you're redeeming. The second requirement was that you must be able to redeem. It means you must have the finances to be able to redeem. The third reason is the one that's redeeming must not be in bondage themselves. And the fourth reason is that the kinsman must be willing to redeem. You can meet the first 3 requirements, but you may say, well, I just don't feel like doing it. I don't want to do it. We must be willing to redeem. Now, the first one, which is they must be related to the one being redeemed, this first requirement deals directly with our subject lesson, which is the virgin birth and the hypostatic union. Only a near kinsman was allowed to redeem. Therefore, if God was determined to redeem mankind, then it was necessary that he become as one of us and take on himself a human body. Now in John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." And then verse 14 it says, "And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." Now, in these verses, John is declaring the eternal character of the one who was made flesh and dwelt among us. So he says here, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so John is describing that this character who is born into this world to become like us is an eternal being. The word beginning must predate John chapter 1 verse 1. I'm sorry, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. John says that the person that's being referred to here is as becoming incarnate was already in existence in eternity past before Genesis 1:1. So he's saying in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God before anything. And then he says in verse 2, the same was in the beginning with God. Then in verse 3, all things were made by him. So he's bringing up the eternal character of this person who existed before anything was created. Now, this pre-existent being is going to enter into our existence. In 1 John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, there we have to deal with a group of people called the Gnostics. Now, the Gnostics did not believe that God would come and unite himself with a human body. So, Gnosticism was a prevalent teaching back in their time, in the time of the disciples. And Gnosticism believed that God himself would not come and become a human being. Now, Gnostics had two main beliefs. The first main belief was that the human intellect and that enlightenment were superior over faith and conduct of the Bible. So Gnosticism put human intellect and enlightenment over faith. The second main belief that Gnosticism had was that spirit is good and that matter is inherently evil. Matter meaning anything material, anything that you can see with your eyes. This table, the computer, curtains, sheetrock, wood, trees, dogs, cat, anything that you can see with your eyes is something that's considered material. And Gnosticism believed that spirit is good and that matter is inherently evil. So all of this that you can see, the lights, the curtains and windows and whatever, everything here is if you can see it and touch it and feel it, it's evil. Now, because of this second view that matter is inherently evil, the Gnostics believed that God would not unite himself with something that's evil. Our physical body, it's material. Therefore, Gnosticism believed that it was inherently evil. Therefore, if God is holy, and he is, then he would not unite himself with a human body. But even the Gnostics had an explanation for the incarnation, because Christianity at that time of the disciples, the early church, they were preaching that God came in the flesh. So Gnosticism had to have an explanation for that. What's our view of, what's the Gnostic view of the incarnation? Well, they had two different views on the incarnation. The first view is called Docetism. Now, the Greek word dokeo means to seem to appear. To seem to appear. So the Gnostics say that Jesus did not really have a human body, but he only seemed to have one. So their response, their first response to the incarnation that Christianity was teaching was Docetism. That, well, it looked like Jesus had a human body, but it wasn't really a human body. Now, the second view that they had was Cerinthianism. Now, this view separated Jesus from the Christ. It taught that the man Jesus was righteous, just as wise, he was a just person, and he was a wise person. And at his baptism, the Christ Spirit came upon him and gave him power to do his ministry. So Cerinthianism says that Jesus was a good man, righteous man, holy man, but it wasn't until when he was baptized by John the Baptist that that then the Christ Spirit came upon him. All right. Then, just before the crucifixion took place, the Christ Spirit left Jesus, and Jesus then suffered and rose from the dead, rose again. But the Christ Spirit remained pure from earthly defilement. So these were two different views that Gnostics had concerning the incarnation. Now, but John here in 1 John chapter 1, in these first 3 verses, John comes right out against the Gnostic beliefs. John, this first letter of John here is dealing mainly with Gnosticism. He wrote this letter to refute Gnosticism. And right from the very beginning, John comes out like a boxer. You know, John, you hear the bell, ding. John's coming out, and he's not, feeling the guy out for the first minute or two, and then throwing a punch here and there. No, John comes right out to the middle of the ring, and he starts slugging away. I mean, he's pounding, he's hitting, and he's right from the very first verse of this letter. He comes out swinging against Gnosticism. All right. So he says here, John used 3 phrases in these verses to attack Gnosticism. Three phrases he uses to attack Gnosticism. All right. Let's read it. It says here, that which is from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled, of the word of God. For the life was manifest, and we have seen it, and bear witness, and show unto you that eternal life, which was with the Father, and was manifested unto us. That which we have seen and heard, declare we unto you, that you also may have fellowship with us, and truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. Now, the 3 phrases that John uses is, he says, we've seen with our eyes. We've seen God in the flesh with our own eyes. He's visible. Then he says, which we have heard. So we heard him with our ears. It wasn't a figment of our imagination. No, he's real. But the one that drives the stake into the heart of the Gnostic is this one here. We have handled him with our hands, right? We have handled him. And this Greek word for handled means that you actually feel something. So Gnosticism was saying, no, that God wouldn't really come in the flesh. It only seemed like flesh. John is saying, no, it was flesh. We actually touched him with our own hands. We handled him, and we touched him, and we saw him with our eyes, and we heard him with our ears. He was a living being. God actually came, and he actually took on himself a human body, and it's real. What John is saying is that God did come in the flesh, and we heard him with our ears. We saw him with our eyes, and we actually touched him. Now, to finish this lesson in Hebrews chapter 1, and we'll be dealing more with Hebrews next lesson in our second part on this teaching. In Hebrews 1 verse 3, he says here, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image, what? Of his person. The express image of his person. That's the key, of his person. Now, this Greek word for of his person is hypostasis. Hypostasis. And hupo means taking under, and stasis means a substance. Taking under a substance. Now, what's the definition of hypostasis? This is why we call it the hypostatic union. Hypostatic means hypostasis. He's taking on himself a human body. So the definition of hypostasis, or the hypostatic union, is two natures united inseparably without mixture or loss of separate identity. Let me repeat that again. The hypostatic union can be defined as two natures united inseparably, but without mixture and without loss of separate identity. So what it's saying is that God came and was clothed with a human body, but his deity did not blend in with his humanity, and the humanity did not blend in with the deity. They remained separate, but each part, the deity and the humanity, remained in it kept its independence. All right, it's like it's cold out. I always use this example. It's cold out. You're going to go outside. What do? You put a coat on, right? You put a coat on. When you put your coat on, that coat doesn't blend in with your flesh. It doesn't just melt in with your flesh, and your flesh doesn't melt in with the coat, does it? No, you put a coat on, but your coat is still a coat, individual. Your body is still your body. They're still separate, but they are united. When you put the coat on, you are uniting yourself with that coat. But the coat isn't your body, and your body isn't the coat. And this is what happened when God took upon himself a human body. God was clothed with the human body. He clothed his deity with humanity, and they are forever united. But they're not mixed with each other. And this is why in heaven, when we get to heaven, Jesus Christ is throughout all of eternity. He is going to be the God-man. The God-man. He will keep his human body. He will keep that human body throughout all of eternity so that he can identify with us. Almighty, infinite God humbled himself to be clothed with a human body. And he had to do it. Why? Because of in order for God to be a proper kinsman redeemer, the first requirement is you had to be related to the one you're redeeming. Well, God wants to redeem us. He wanted to redeem us in eternity past, so he had to devise a plan where he would come and be born into this world to become like us, and related to us, so that he can redeem us. All right, until next lesson, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.